Yo, what's up, everybody out there? My name is Kingsley Manasa, and you're watching the Sound Guild. This is probably episode number 2 or something like that. And this is a show that focuses on music as well as social and political topics. And today, I just want to give a little bit of history on the African origins of country music. You know what I'm saying? And why is this important? Well, it's important to mention this in terms of the education side of it, because for me, when I was younger as a kid growing up, I always associated country music with just white people. You know what I'm saying? Just white folks, that was living in the country. You know what I'm saying? Especially growing in California, in Southern California, in the city. You know what I mean? You probably didn't come across too many, folks from, white folks from rural towns and shit like that. So anyway, so when the music honestly was just something that you just bypass on the radio stations. You know what I mean? Or at least that's what I do. Um, as I gotten older and obviously more educated, I started realizing and started wanting to do the history onto how the American music industry came about, and the roles that African Americans played. You know what I mean? Throughout American arts and culture and music and whatnot. And as you do the history, you start to realize that black folks, you know what I mean, were pretty much all throughout as foundational, building blocks of many music genres. In fact, all the music genres that America knows as American music is pretty much stems somewhere along the line stems from a history of the African American. You know what I mean? Whether it be post-slavery through Jim Crow or actually during slavery. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to focus on a few things, a few terms. One of the terms we're going to focus on is a weird one. It's a word called contrafactum. And what contrafactum means is basically when you keep old melodies from a song, let's say like a folk song, you know what I mean? You keep the same melody, but then you change the wording, you know what I mean? And the wording usually is something that relates to the time frame that, you know what I mean, the song is being used for. So when it comes to the African spirituals, that we were out singing in the fields during slavery, there was a lot of contrafactum going on in terms of memorizing and taking melodies. Either they was from church melodies or maybe some from the actual native land, some melodies that they remembered, and then those particular melodies stayed on through time, and then the wording and things like that changed. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that blacks were slaves, so a lot of the references and stuff deal with a lot of struggle and things, and hard labor and fucking dehumanizing conditions. So just want to give a little bit of history about that, and while we roll into some of the key components of early country and why I mention all that about early black music, being from the spirituals and then going into the gospel into the blues, and how the blues pretty much is been circulating, as a foundational piece for black music. I mean, shit. At least I would say historically you could date it from the 19th century. But I mean, yeah, when it comes to just the instruments of like the fiddle and the banjo. So, anyways, the one of the key components of why when we say the African origins of country music, we're gonna trace it to the Carter family, which the Carter family was a white family that A.P. Carter, the male of the family, he would go around. He was what you would call back in the day a song catcher. And a song catcher was basically what he would do is he would be rolling around, Tennessee, and essentially be looking around, at different musicians, and asking them to play certain melodies, maybe sing a song, and he would pretty much pick up these tunes, for himself, and then come back to the Carter family and share, and kind of revamp the songs a little bit or rearrange them and things like that and kind of make them his own, or just kind of take ideas and things like that, or it might just take the full song and then just re-sing it. So a lot of that was going on, and within that area, in the South, in North Carolina, Tennessee, and things like that, there was a community of musicians, you know, and there was a African American man by the name of Leslie Riddle. Um, he he was he was a well-known talent throughout that whole area. He's from North Carolina. He was born in 1905, and he met AP Carter, and him and AP Carter would go around together throughout Tennessee, from the mountains down into the black towns like Kingsport, Tennessee, and things like that. And they would go around and they would be essentially listening to these other musicians play melodies. And AP Carter would, as he wrote, that Leslie Riddle was like his human jukebox, because he would he would memorize all the melodies and play them back, while AP Carter would pretty much try to get the words of the song, the lyrics, and things like that. So AP Carter and Leslie Riddle would be going around, traveling around. They did this at least documented about 15 times or so, like traveling around areas throughout the South and Tennessee in particular, and just kind of searching around for these particular sounds. And AP Carter, in the musician community at the time, he wasn't as well known as Leslie Riddle. So Leslie Riddle was really like he vouched for AP Carter to pretty much go around and be and be the musician hanging around to where he can go into these black towns and hear these blues singers and and players and stuff like that, and hear some of these gospel singers and hear some of these African spirituals sang. You know what I mean? So AP would take a lot of that influence and then take it back to the Carter family, and then they essentially created country music. You know what I mean? Like the country music that we know of today. And there's this certain type of style of playing that Maybelle Carter plays. I think it's Maybelle Carter or Maribel Carter. I think it's Maybelle Carter. So excuse me if I got the name wrong, but yes, Maybelle Carter, which she's the guitarist in the group in the Carter family, and she's well known for a certain style they call the Carter scratch. And the Carter scratch is like this style of playing in country music where you play these low notes and the high notes at the same time on the guitar. And when they asked me about, hey, where did you learn that style of playing? Because that's pretty much like a staple of like a style of playing in country music. And she credited that to Leslie Riddle, and say he's the one that taught me that style. So it's very interesting, you know what I mean, to see how Leslie Riddle himself as an African American was pretty fucking profound, like in that whole development when it comes to country music. You know what I'm saying? And as time went on, things throughout the 1930s and the 40s, country music started picking up in terms of certain artists started, kind of remaking songs from the Carter family or from other, other groups and bands or whatever, and actually, making their own material. And eventually, as far as like Leslie Riddle being credited for his influence, like that wasn't the case. You know what I'm saying? And we all know why that is, because during Jim Crow and shit like that, there was no way in hell they were going to allow a black person, you know what I mean, be frontline and centered of creating a genre style of music. You know what I mean? Like this has happened throughout throughout history, throughout the music industry. You know what I'm saying? The music industry, because of racism, has been well known for whites to come in and basically into black towns and to like take their style of playing with music and their songs and to take some of the African spirituals and things like that and kind of turn them and revamp them into their own and put their white face on it. Like, this is a well-known thing throughout rock and roll when it comes to people like the comparison of Elvis Presley or Chuck Berry. You know what I'm saying?
Nobody appreciates more different kinds of music than you. That's obvious. But did you feel at the time, in the 50s, early 60s, a resentment of some of the white performers who were copying R&B stuff and selling more records than you and your contemporaries were?
I just didn't object to it. I just felt that the music it wasn't that good to care about. Now, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I'm being honest with you.
Maybe some exceptions, though. I mean, Elvis was a talented guy.
Well, okay.
Not necessarily. You know better than I.
Yeah.
Let me ask it differently. How good was Elvis?
What Elvis did, he caused a lot of the populace, if you want it, and usually when people say populace, they usually mean white people, to start listening to a lot of music that normally they wouldn't have been listening to. I guess I'm going to lose at least about a third of my fans right now. But to say that Elvis was so great and so outstanding, like they say, he's the king. I got in trouble because one guy asked me this question, and I said the king of what, and he got mad at me. You see, I don't think of Elvis like that because I know too many artists that are far greater than Elvis. I think Elvis person came along at the right time. Well, here was a white kid that could do rock and roll or rhythm and blues or whatever name you want to call it, and the girls could swoon over him. Nat Cole got in trouble in Alabama when the women swooned over him, got put out of town. And black people have been going out shaking their behind for centuries. What the hell's unusual about that shaking their hips and stuff? And that's all Elvis was doing, was copying that. And he was doing our kind of music. He was doing the Willie Mae Thornton jailhouse rock. That's black music. So what the hell am I supposed to get so excited about, man? But I think all this stuff about saying he's the king and he's the... it's a piece of bunk. Sorry. Next question. Don't ask me no more about Elvis, because I've gotten enough trouble as it is.
I think you covered it, though. I don't think a follow-up is necessary.
Okay, all right.
Or like when people love the Beatles, but don't realize that the Beatles pretty much, like they say it themselves, that they highly they love black music. They literally like played it throughout their first beginning stages of them being a band. You know what I mean? And why? So when I bring this up in terms of things like Leslie Riddle, and I talked about the Beatles or other groups, other well-known white musicians, that if you didn't know the history, you would think that all this shit just came out of their genius mind. You would think, you know what I'm saying? And it's this type of, and the reason why I say this is because this type of brainwashing and indoctrination stems back from, the 15th century, when Europeans were coming out of the Middle Ages, or what we would call the Dark Ages, and going into the Renaissance era, into what they would call the Age of Enlightenment, where all of a sudden now they're starting to fucking get into the fine arts and play, these Baroque classic music and all this shit, you know what I'm saying? And, getting out of the medieval times of the church and shit like this. So, as they were coming into this and then implementing, economic systems that were very oppressive, to other nations and shit, with mercantilism before predating capitalism. So all these type of things that they were creating, it was a mission for them to indoctrinate, Europe as if they're the ones that created this, with no influences on other outside cultures or things like that. So like this whole, like what we would call white domination, you know what I'm saying? Like it all stems back from that time period. And you would see this like in now when it comes to things like folk country music, how somebody like Leslie Riddle is as much of a building block for country music as he was, how he gets no recognition for it, because the music industry is pretty much That's what it was. Creating white domination is, is going in and pretty much taking and culturally appropriating things and then turning it into your own, as because you're the dominant culture. So yeah, so it's important to shine light to these things. You know what I mean? And because it's further than just saying things like, well, it gives hope to the other, to like, someone of color. It goes a little farther than that, if you ask me. For me, it deals with the white pathology in all of this. Like, for instance, it's very sickening for a society to be socialized into something to where you're able to go in and take something from a oppressed people and then glorify it as your own. You know what I mean? And honestly, that's a really it's a sick mind state to do that. So so when people sit here and say things like, well, we just want to be, or be equal, you don't really want to be equal to whiteness, because the history of that deals with a lot of violence, a lot of fucking a lot of oppression. You know what I mean? So you don't want to be equal to that. You know what I'm saying? And you want to separate yourself from that mind state, because that's the white pathology for you. The fact that so that's just the answer of why is this important. When people say, well, what's the big deal if someone like the Beatles or whatever took black music, or if Elvis, took fucking Chuck Berry's fucking whole get down, or if rockabilly music is really just, blues, on top of fucking, what they're calling rock or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And they're denying the fact that all this stuff was pretty much, Chuck Berry and those guys was doing that shit for years. So, why is it important? It's important because it's that you don't want me as a black person, right, in the world. Now, if just kind of looking on the outside, I wouldn't want to equate myself with a mindset of knowing that I'm taking things from an oppressive people, from people that in society they treat as subhuman, and then taking things from them and then glorifying it as my own, making money off of it, all that. That's a really sick fucking mind state. But this is what happens when you're socialized into racism. It gets so bad, to where you don't realize the things that you're perpetuating, and that's why everyday people like myself and whoever need to start shining light on these type of things. So the next time when somebody says something like, oh, they did this shit to us because we're black, they didn't do this because we're black, they did it because they're white. And it's a problem, it's a issue, it's a mental breakdown that they have to deal with amongst themselves in their own community. You know what I'm saying? Just like other communities have to deal with their issues as well too. To sum that whole concept of white pathology up, so therefore people understand that, when these things do occur, when you see these racial injustices and things like that happens, you have to think twice and just say, look, let me just get the education a little more, and then I can pretty much navigate my way through to understand why these white folks are doing the things they do, why this white institution behaves the way it behaves. You know what I'm saying? Like, just to kind of get a more understanding of this, of how the mental is fucked up when it comes to racism. Like, take for instance early music genres, because we talked about country, and but let's just take it a little bit before country, a little bit sidetrack, and let's just talk about, let's say, a genre like early like ragtime or something like that. Let's say here is a genre, or even before ragtime, let's just say even some of the early folk songs, or the early spiritual songs, some of the early African American spiritual songs that African Americans sang out there in the field, slaving, and how minstrel shows, all minstrel show songs are pretty much all of those fucking African spirituals that were remade and done in a way, because minstrel was a way to try to, for white folks, because white pathology, the sick-mindedness of racism, of them going out and basically trying to make a show as to how it is on a plantation, you know what I mean, amongst slaves. And they would do this shit with song and dance and fucking comedy, and and these white folks would dress up in these black faces and tell jokes and shit and talk with this twang and whang, all this bullshit, you know what I'm saying, like all this massa talk. And that whole fucking massa going down there out yonder, that bullshit, you know what I'm saying, they be talking that shit. And literally trying to make it a image, as in, creating propaganda to make it seem like life wasn't all that bad, under slavery, you know what I'm saying, under white domination and aggression, so the rabbit hole goes very deep, you know what I'm saying. If you really want to do the education, you know what I'm saying, and a lot of people say do the research, but you know what I mean, there's some real shit that needs to be addressed, you know what I'm saying, because it's important, because all these things are said, because if you don't know, if you really don't know, and you don't like what's going on as far as the system or whatever, and if you don't understand the building blocks of the foundation of it or the history, you damn sure don't know where the fuck you're gonna be heading, man. And if you don't know where you're heading, you're gonna be very vulnerable for many different interpretations and versions of things that's going to be told to you, that's going to water down what the actual truth is, and then that's going to fucking distort your how you navigate through life and your worldview of life, and how you see African history, you know what I'm saying. And so just wanted to kind of shine some light on that, you know what I mean, and just be on the lookout for some other posts, you know what I'm saying. I've been contemplating on posting something about the Astro World event, but my interpretation of what's going on is very different. It's not about fucking spiritual demonic concerts and shit like that. It's something, you know what I mean, that deals with something a little further, something real, more rational thought process in terms of that. So yeah, now I will share that view with you guys later. All right then, peace. Later.
When we think of criminal, we don't think of Wall Street bankers, right? We think of black and brown people, we think of poor people, 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 poor people. One is maybe to take up the framework that there exists not just a third world out there, but a third world in here. I didn't know middle-class white people, and two, though, is because the television was always telling me that, the news was always telling me that, the films were always telling me that, and I believed them. other parts of the world and fix what's wrong over there, and that often distracts from things that are wrong over here. Here. The labor of poor people and need to have them close by, but they don't want anything to do with them, and so then they build like a world right next to them that is it's so enclosed and it's such a bubble that they don't have to interact, they don't have to see each other.